This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. All right. Well, good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
So you could probably tell my voice sounds like not all the way there because it's not. I've been losing my voice for like the past week. Just doesn't want to come back. So
this is nothing new with you.
I don't know. I've never had this many issues in my life.
I can't.
Like when I was younger, I didn't have issues like this at all. And it's like
I don't have any reference points because you've always been like that since I've known you.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like as soon as I had kids, it's like it just all went downhill.
The little petri dishes.
Constantly sick. I actually get white hairs in my beard now, and
it's distinguishing.
Yeah, I'm not quite at Kelly's level yet. There's only just like a few here, a few there. But
so what do we got today?
I know we missed today. I think we missed a podcast last week, so I just I'm going to push through it, and you guys can listen to this weirdly altered voice of mine. I don't think Calvin can fix it, so
no,
we don't have an AI filter for that yet.
We might. It might be one of those things where we can make you sound like Daffy Duck or Bugs Bunny or Woody Woodpecker would be good.
Of course, man. All right. Well, so I'm gonna just run through some titles of articles that are all the same. Mm-hmm. So one of them is student flashed a gun during a fight outside of a high school.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there was another one where a student was arrested after being found with a weapon. It was in his book bag. And then today, a lockdown was initiated following reports of a student in possession of a weapon on campus.
Disturbing trend, right? There was a news story, I think it was yesterday, it might have been the day before, that it was in the South, I want to say South Carolina, not 100% on that, but it was a police chief begging kids to stop going to all these fights, right? They're
like all organized fights, like
organized.
Yeah, we'll meet you at this time.
Yep.
Okay.
And they started with some issue in the schools, and everyone gets word, hey, there's going to fight after school. We used to, that happened when there's going to be a fight. Who is it? It was a good one. We'd go watch if it wasn't, and we didn't see, there weren't many good ones. But this has been going on for many years. Kids used to duke it out, but we don't let them anymore. I get it. But that being said, the practice has evolved into we're going to film it. We're going to post it. We're going to other people. It used to be what I would say was fair. I know that that's subjective, but it was between the two combatants, right? And nobody else would step in. If you lost, you lost. If you won, you won. But it was over. And in today's world, you likely have two factions, one for one person, one for the other. And if one of them is starting or looking like they're going to lose, other people step in, and
it just becomes a whole like crowd
melee
mosh pit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the concern of this chief of police was there's a marked escalation of firearms. The number of firearms that are becoming involved and kids are being killed. I think in the incidents that he was referencing was, I think there were 2 kids that were shot and killed because there were weapons involved, because there were accessible weapons and somebody was losing, right?
That's because they just don't know how to handle, first of all, they obviously shouldn't be even having a firearm on them because of their age, but it's just like, there's also that, just letting their emotions just
they
go
can't control
crazy, and it's And it's like sometimes you see that with adults too. It's like you get these situations where like adults get into a fight and then they pull out a weapon. It's like, okay, you really didn't need to pull out a weapon there. Like that was completely, even if you're like legally allowed to have it, like you escalated that way more than you needed to.
You need to, yeah.
And that's not what, if you're using it for personal defense, that's not what it's designed for. So it's less common, but
we're seeing society-wide less mature decisions.
yes.
And so people are, I'm going to say, not maturing until later in life, right? Because they're carrying these emotional reactions to things, and we've lost all logic in things. I'm not going to fight you. This isn't a thing. But there's this sort of primal, you challenge me, I'm going to fight you. And oh, by the way, somebody in this crowd's going to have a gun. It just is, we call them, they're immature for a reason. They don't have a fully developed cognitive brain yet. That's why we don't let them drive till they're 16. We don't let them vote and do things until they're 18. We don't let them drink until they're 21. There's all kinds of reasons that we do things because based upon the maturity level or lack of in the physical development of humans. And then when we don't foster good decisions, I remember every day when my kids got up to go to school, make good decisions that on the way out. Love you, kid, but make good decisions. And of course, I had to say that more than once to my son. But
that's typical,
right? But boys are boys, and somebody's going to say, "You can't say that, Kelly." Yes, I can. Yeah. Boys are different than girls. Period. Somebody's going to say something bad, or they're going to say that I'm an idiot or whatever. But
I mean, biologically, our insurance is literally double what car insurance. Ours is literally double what a girl's is. Yeah. I don't necessarily agree with that, but
but the fact is that we process things differently.
Yep.
Than girls do, and there's a maternal instinct and a paternal instinct that is natural I'm going to say natural, and people are going to say, you don't. I'm just saying, raise boys versus raising girls. Different. It's a whole different skill set. And it's just one of those things that boys, I'm going to say this knowing that I'm going to get some back. Boys will be boys, but you got to treat them like that. You got to say, this is not right. You got to have them make better decisions than they're making. And in some cases, we've lost the ability to have consequences in raising our kids. And so they're allowed to run rampant. But, we've talked about this a little bit previously, is that why guns are so popular. And that's because they're the equalizer.
There's really nothing beyond that you can...
Beyond that, it's the equalizer. When you're talking about struggling for power, however you define that, we've been using it for hundreds and hundreds of years of conflict, is what can I do to not only equalize my power over somebody so that we're at least equal, but to overpower them. And that's the whole arms race. That's all of the military statuses and so forth. We've been doing it forever, and it's no different now than before. And we have to figure out how to deal with that, because people are very quick to go to the equalizer when they don't need to. Part of that, I think, is coping skills. Part of that is, I think, decision making, problem solving, critical thinking, those types of things.
That's what I was just thinking about. A video I saw, it must have been like last night or something, where it was someone taking a video, a student taking a video in a school, and this kid meets up with, they're both walking down the hallway, and he meets up with this kid, and one of the kids is the attacker, I'll call him, is a smaller statured, less weight kid, and he goes after a kid who's like a lacrosse player, who's like much bigger kid. And he just, the second he sees him, he just comes in and tries to punch him,
he like totally misses a punch, and the lacrosse kid rightfully was like, "What?" And he just takes the kid and just throws him like a rag doll like into the lockers. And I was like, see, that was an example of like probably not
Consequences.
the right decision.
It was consequences,
But
right?
you instantly learned your lesson
Yeah.
quite quickly of like, hey, maybe that wasn't the right call. Not being able to handle your emotions.
You know, there's the saying, and I'll use the acronym
Yeah, I know.
FAFO, right? But that's what that's how we learned things
Yeah.
back in the day, right? I was a big kid and I got challenged a lot in growing up in school. The area that I grew up in was not the highest economically stature or situated area. A lot of gangs, and
Yep.
a lot of times I was the target of I'm going to say gang hazing. I don't think anyone really hated me, but I used to, because I was the big kid, part of the gang. Things were to go challenge me, go get him.
Interesting.
Yep.
Usually, like in schools, you feel like the younger, smaller kids are getting bullied.
No, I was singled out a lot. I would stand in line and people would come.
That's so weird. Like, why would you challenge them? That's like,
because it's part of their initiation.
Like, hey, if you can take on this guy, then you're part of our club.
If you want to show us you're tough enough to be, go get that one.
Okay.
And I'm like, I mean, lots of times.
What are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing? But I got into lots of fights. None
Wow.
that I started.
Did you win most of them?
I held my own. I was the youngest of 6 kids. I have 4 older brothers.
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 3, and I kind of have a small piece of that. So
I'm the youngest, and there was a lot of fighting in the family. Some of those I started.
I had to learn to adapt, and like, if I'm not the biggest, then I gotta fight in a different way.
Yeah, I was lucky. So, I was a big kid.
I was never a big kid, as you probably guessed.
I was the most athletic as well, but I'm not sure where that plays into this. So what else we got today?
Well, it's interesting that we talked about these incidents that involved students with guns. You talked about these students really not being super educated on them, making poor decisions, rash decisions, yada yada yada. So the thing I want to talk about is really interesting to me. Maybe not interesting to some people, but that's okay. It is an article that I saw. I'm just getting a little pop up. So Tennessee, according to this, is the first state to pass a law requiring gun safety training in schools, teaching kids how to navigate guns in their homes, in communities. And so obviously this is Tennessee is a big pro-gun state.
Yeah.
So I know there's in this article it's talking about, there's a good amount of like accidental shootings from young kids with guns. So it's part of what drove this, I think.
It's a safety issue, right? First and foremost.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're pro or against firearms, but if you in your community, and we've talked about communities, and we'll probably end up talking a little bit more about those today. But if you have a big problem of safety, something that's causing safety in your communities, I think you're obligated to address it. To me, this is a proactive approach at trying to increase the safety. But go ahead with what you were going to say.
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting to me because I know, I'll say back in the day.
You can't say that. You're
before
not old enough
before
to
my
say that.
time. I think in the 50s or something, they mean this having like gun courses, like gun safety courses, like how to make sure you know how to operate it, kind of thing. Maybe was much more prevalent,
Right, but
in schools.
Firearms was much more. I mean, you could literally order a firearm through the mail, right, through a catalog.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like up until like the 80s.
The I would say maybe the most the 70s, maybe.
Okay.
I could be wrong. I
Okay.
didn't live in New Hampshire,
Yeah.
but it was a thing, right? And I also think that was a safety issue. I think you used to have a lot of things in schools that were meant to train you for life, not necessarily teach you solely math and arithmetic, or the three R's, right? But I do think there's some benefit to that. I understand the argument that say, we shouldn't be doing that. But to me, if you have a safety issue with firearms in your community, teach firearm safety, right? Because the tragedy of firearms is generally categorized as the mishandling or the misuse of that firearm.
Yeah. So I think like a lot of stuff you see is just a young kid seeing it, because it wasn't stored correctly or whatever. They pull it out of a nightstand, whatever. And like, ooh, what's this? And they're just touching it and they pull the trigger and it goes off and, chaos. So
Yeah, right.
it's just that understanding of like, hey, this is dangerous.
Right.
Yeah.
But it is. I mean, there's been I don't know that this is or isn't still a practice. In my high school, we had a competitive rifle team.
Yeah. So I think there's like some like ROTC programs that
Yep.
might have that.
Yep. And when I say back in the day, it was back in the day. It was not uncommon for students in high school to have a gun rack in their car with a shotgun or a rifle because they would hunt on the way to and from school during hunting season. That was not uncommon.
It's like now if you saw some kid's car with a gun in there, I mean, it would just the whole entire police department showing up, like SWAT team, like.
If you're not actively possessing it or in control of it, they need to be safely secured. They need to be secured. You can't just leave firearms because they get stolen. They get misused. They get mishandled. And that's part of this. I'm assuming that's part of this safety course is the proper storage. And I'm good with that. The question comes in is that our school is the proper place to do that, right? Why are you teaching firearms safety in a school when we're trying to keep firearms out of schools, right?
It's a good question.
And so I think it depends on your perspective, right? So if you're trying to teach the safety and handling and proper use of a firearm, there's been a lot of things. Some people would argue that home economics, a cooking class or sewing class, is that a proper place to have it in school? I did both of those when I was growing up. I didn't have a choice. I had a cooking class. I had a sewing class. I did typing. I did lots of things that may or may not, I don't know today if they're still doing that kind of stuff, but I'm guessing they're not. But we did that because we needed to learn what they called back then life skills. We needed to know how to take care of ourselves. So it's a common practice to put some of that stuff into the schools. Why? Because you're likely in most communities, you're likely to see every kid, right? So I remember in our community, we had several kids. Being Southern California, there were lots of pools in people's backyards and access to pools. And so part of our nonprofit organization that built some of the pools in the schools, part of that funding went to train every third grader in our schools how to swim. Right? It wasn't because
it's good life skills.
But it wasn't because that's where it belonged, so to speak. It was, how do we get access to every third grader? They're in school.
Right, because if you think about it, it's like, okay, could you go to the route of like coming up with a course that you give to parents and have them educate their kid? Sure, but like, not, are they going to do it? I don't know. They could.
Are they capable of doing it?
Are they capable of doing it? Right.
Right. So just like any other instructor, if you want somebody to learn something properly, you need to have the training to do that yourself. Now, I could teach my kids how to properly handle a firearm. But when I taught my kids, I didn't teach them. My kids knew about gun safety.
Yeah.
I took them to my firearms instructors at the department and said, could you take half hour, an hour, and teach them gun safety? Why? Because they're the ones I know how to handle a gun safely.
Sure.
I know how to shoot a gun properly. Obviously, there's a pause there because you can't say shoot it safely because as soon as you shoot it, it's no longer safe.
Yeah. Right.
But they know how to teach that because they're teaching people who don't know. Some of them have never held a firearm before, right? And some of them are nervous about it, but they do that all of the time. So it was better for me to have these certified instructors teach firearm safety and how to handle a gun properly to my children, right? And I reinforced that, right? Especially with my son, especially when he got older, and we taught him how to handle a firearm. I took him shooting as part of that stuff. My daughter didn't really. She had an interest, but she didn't want to go out shooting just for the fun of it. But she learned, and she asked me, "Can you teach me how to do this?" And yep, but I'm going to have one of the instructors do it. Took her up to the range and we shot.
Yeah. For me, it was my dad that, ran through all the 4 rules and
Right.
like really stressed like how incredibly like dangerous this can be.
Right.
Like this is not a toy. It's not,
Yep.
All that kind of thing. He like really ingrained in me like that. I'll call it a healthy respect for what it was.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so,
and just like any other course, your parents have to reinforce what they're learning at school
mhm.
at home.
Yep.
The learning at school is just the surface, and if you're interested, you need to take it deeper, and that's got to be reinforced at home.
I guess one of the thoughts I have is this could be one of those things where like parents have the option of like opting their kid out. Do you think that they should be allowed to do that? What's the impact if like half the students do this and half of them don't?
So I gather that in the current state of our schools, they'll be allowed to opt out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I would gather that there will be people who don't do it. Part of it's for the wrong reason because they're nervous around them. They don't want to, they're not familiar enough. They're not comfortable. And a lot of people don't like being put in positions that are uncomfortable.
Sure.
Even if it makes you safer, right? So I'm guessing that they will, if it's not allowed in the law, it will become in the future people would be opt out because there are some families who are adamantly against firearms. Now, the Second Amendment allows you to keep and bear arms, right? We won't go into that whole thing, but it doesn't demand that you do.
Right.
Right. So
unless you live in like Switzerland.
Yeah, I was just going to say there are
Sweden,
countries, Switzerland.
Like if you own a house, you're required to have.
They give you a gun. Yeah, you're part of the militia.
Crazy.
You're automatically part of. They give you a rifle.
That's wild.
I'm waiting for my government to give me a rifle. They haven't yet. I keep asking. But the idea of being safer, I'm all for it, right? If it gives kids a healthy respect for it. I will caution you on this, Tennessee. Just because kids are comfortable with guns doesn't mean they're going to handle them correctly.
Yeah.
Right? Just because they're safer with guns.
We've seen people who are like avid gun shooters mishandle firearms. There's numerous cases of that. So it's even in adults it happens.
And the analogy that I will use in this is at least back in the day, most schools had driver's ed classes. And right, so the schools were training. They had certified instructors. You had to go to driver's ed, and it was provided in the schools. We still had accidents. We still had death caused by driving from kids. If you understand that dynamic or that those circumstances that we're training every kid to drive safely, yet they still don't. There's a reason for that. It's called immaturity.
Yep.
And their ability to make good decisions all of the time is not there in a lot of them.
So, man, it's like, so you have the cases of kids just mishandling a firearm and not understanding what they're doing totally, and it goes off. Sure, that happens too many times. But then you have the instances where you have these kids who know exactly what they're doing. They've written out plans, yada yada, hit list, you name it, and they know exactly how to handle it. Handle it being the firearm. So it almost begs the question of like, do we need a course on like the value of life? Because I feel like a lot of these kids that are doing it just don't understand like what you're doing, you know, like, is that possible? Can we have a course on that?
You're making the assumption that a lot of us make, is that every person values life. Not everyone does, right? And we hear it a lot when you have this tragedy in your community, especially in your community, and you hear somebody, a witness, somebody involved, she just went crazy. He just went crazy. He must have been crazy. And we're using crazy is not an absolute. It's not an objective evaluation. Psychologists will say that it is, but it's not. He's either crazy or he's not. She's either crazy or she's not. There's this continuum, and there are things that can make us crazy at the spur of the moment. The reason we label that is because that's something that we wouldn't do. It's not normal. Crazy is outside of the norm. It's not something that we would do. So in order for us to be driven to those actions, we would have to, in our minds, we would have to be crazy to do that. I think we actually say that.
Yeah.
Right?
Almost literally, word for word.
We'd have to be crazy to do that. So we naturally think, well, oh, they're crazy. No, they're not crazy. Oftentimes, they knew exactly what they were doing. It was calculated.
Yeah.
They don't have value, or they lost the value of life. Should we teach people the value of life? Absolutely. Should we teach people to respect each other? Yes. Should we teach them conflict resolution? Yes. Coping skills? Yes. Decision making? Yes. Value is very difficult to teach because it's subjective. And is it worth it to you or is it not? And that's a hard thing to work through. But I think efforts to make places safer are better than
Nothing
no
at all.
effort.
Yeah.
But I do think, just like everything else that we talk about, and I don't think I've said this enough recently, but everything that we plan for, all of the prevention, all of the stuff that we're doing to keep our schools safe, you have to ask your question. The single most important question that is, I think, out there. What happens if everything that I'm doing fails? What happens if all of my prevention acts, all of my safety efforts, all of my security efforts, what happens if it fails? If you can answer that question, and we talk about what's the worst case scenario, same question. Because the worst case scenario is everything that I've been doing fails, right? So how do, when we, and I know you're going to be shocked by this, but when we talk about left of bang,
oh boy,
we're doing all of this stuff to prevent, mitigate, prepare for, right? All that stuff is done before. Why do we do that? Because it gives us the best opportunity to prevent, prepare, mitigate, respond to, right? It gives us that best opportunity. But we should be doing that with the idea or the question lingering in your mind. What do I do if this fails? What happens if all my efforts fail? Those are what we're talking about when we talk about those efforts that fail. Well, hi there, Gideon. But it's at those points that we either fill or create the reactionary gap. If we think that nothing is going to happen to us, you and I have heard this at some conferences. It's not going to happen to us. We're a small rural school. Well, what happens if it does? I'll yell down the hallway. It's a small school. Nobody's going to hear you, principal, from underneath your desk.
No.
Because that's where that person's going. So if we start answering that, then we can start figuring that out. And if you're going to do all the safety courses, great. Applaud you. But then you're going to have instances where it's going to fail. And we're just going to have those instances because people will be people. We're dealing with human elements and human behavior and forces that we are not even aware of because, like we said in the past, we get our kids in school when they're 5 years old ish, right? Generally speaking, they enter the school system when they're 5, but we get them with everything that comes with that, everything they've been exposed to, everything that they've experienced in those 5 years. Oftentimes, they're still continuing to experience those things. So we have to take it for what it's worth and how it comes. Our job is to educate them. Our job is to make it as safe as we possibly can. We can't make it safer or completely safe, but we can make it safer. Applaud them. If you're doing that and you're educating them on gun safety for a reason, be prepared for when that fails, that you have that. Because what's the first thing that's going to happen when you're teaching all of these kids gun safety and you have either a deliberate act or an accidental act? What's going to happen? Somebody's going to point the finger at you and say, it's all because you tried to teach them how to be safe with guns. You should have never done that.
It'll happen for sure.
And it's difficult to account. We've talked about this before as well, but it's difficult to measure prevention. It's because it's the absence of something happening, right? The prevention. You prevented this from happening, but it's difficult to measure that. It's very easy to measure failure because it's there. Everyone knows that it failed. It is very difficult. And when we talk about after action reviews and reports and stuff, I always ask the question because it's very difficult to even get people to examine success. And I use air quotes there because you have to ask the question, was your success because you did it correctly or because you got lucky, right? And if anyone comes out of that and said, we were lucky, then you need to examine whether or not that success was lucky or because you did it correctly, right? Some people will take that preparation, those drills and all of that stuff, that you're doing everything right. Somebody will say, we got lucky there. But you also generate your own luck.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of increase your odds of succeeding by the things that you're doing in your prevention stage.
Yeah, so that's right. Because your prevention stage teaches you or identifies those things that you should be looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those things that are a threat or a hazard to you and your schools or your community. If I now know what to look for and I start spotting behaviors or I start spotting hazardous conditions earlier because I'm educated on what it is that I need to be looking for, and there was a narrow escape there, was that lucky? Or did I do it correctly because I taught you what to look for, you identified it, and you acted upon it? One of the biggest failures in the see something, say something thing is we see it, but many people fail to report it, to say something.
Yeah.
Or they say it to the wrong person.
Mm.
Right? So that's why I always say, see something, do something. To me, it's a little bit more actionable and a little bit more directive. And that doing something is make sure that you get the information to the right person. If you go back, if you see something that concerns you and you tell your classmate who's also 10, that doesn't count.
No, it doesn't. That doesn't count. It doesn't work.
It doesn't count if you see something and you say something 2 weeks after you saw it.
Mm.
Doesn't count. If you know that your school administrator is not going to do anything, doesn't count.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. And well, not only that, but we hear stories, we see stories all of the time because one, we're looking for them, but we see them all of the time where there was something that was seen and reported, but discounted by either by policy or by
A person.
practice of a person or even systemically, right? That's the
Yeah.
whole reason we have Title IX, right? And we have mandated reporting is because the laws got tired, the legislators got tired of people seeing something and either not saying it or saying it to the wrong person. So
Yeah.
now we have laws that mandate that stuff, right? But it also goes further than that. Even if you're not mandated, if you have a concern about something, you need to make sure the right people know about it, whether it's law enforcement, the fire department, the school administration, the threat assessment team, school safety team. Somebody needs, or the janitor, because something needs to be fixed, right? We have a leaky pipe. Let's fix it. But yeah, this is part of that whole process.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, to see how this works out for them, and they'll have to like really like look at like the data around this, and as time goes on, and like look at
Yeah.
what's currently going on, like how many instances are they having, and then how many instances are they having after the fact, and
Yeah.
try to be able to correlate, like, is it because of it or is it nothing to do with it at all? I mean, it's
Because yeah, sometimes you have the opposite effect, though, right? So you would think it would be easy to say, okay, we're having X number of incidents on average every year. So maybe that's the impetus behind developing the course or the requirement is we're having too many accidental discharges, right? But sometimes, especially in the immediate future after the classes, you start seeing an increase in incidences because they're reported more, right? Because you've educated people on that's not right. This isn't the way you do this. This is how you do it. And if you see
Gotcha.
somebody, then
Okay.
then you need to report it. We saw
That makes sense.
that we would see a huge increase in reports of like sexual assaults and things like that shortly after there was somebody prosecuted for not reporting. If they were prosecuted, now there's a consequences to you not reporting, and then all of a sudden people start reporting.
Now they're reporting things that probably didn't need to be reported. Is that what
No,
you're saying? Like they would,
but they're probably reporting more of what they should have, right?
okay, so there's
That they
things
wouldn't
that were
normally
gotcha.
because somebody's saying, I don't need to. I'm not going to get involved with
Now
that.
they're like, oh shoot, all the things I saw before I should have been reporting. So now they're
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
And you kind of get that little influx, and then you're going to get like a plateau of this
and
is
then
where
it's
we
like
should have
going
been.
to trail off again. Then at some point it's going to trail off again.
Gotcha.
Because
then you're gonna be like, oh shoot, I shouldn't be doing that because I'm gonna get reported. It's gonna go.
Yeah, we had an incident, and that's the reason I brought that up is because we had an incident where there was a private school that was learning of things but not reporting it because they didn't think they were mandated because they were a private school, and their customer base was determinant on how well these schools were operated. So they didn't want to report things or they misreported it or moved people around. We see that quite frequently. You take them out of this position and you put them in another position at another school somewhere else, thinking that that's going to solve that problem. And then all of a sudden it becomes public somehow. And in this case, I forgot what the actual instance was, but it had been going on. There was some reports of inappropriate relationship between, I think it was a school official. I forget what the position actually was. And they kept moving the problem child, the problem administrator from building to building. And it was determined once the parents found out that this had been a practice. And so many of those school officials that had the obligation were prosecuted. I want to say 5 or 10. It was significant. They knew about it and they failed to report it. And they argued, we don't have to. We're private. There's not one place in that law that says you don't have to because you're private. It's if you're a mandated reporter, you're a mandated reporter.
Man,
So
I should get my mom on here because she has a good story about having to report something. She was a school counselor in her earlier career, so
yeah,
of course then if she gets on, then it's
in my position at the school district. So when I was going through my career, I had held several positions in investigations where I was required to report, right? So even law enforcement's a mandated reporter, right? So, and it's because there's so many entities that need to know about these behaviors or these instances. And law enforcement was, okay, you send it to me and I'll take legal action against them. And they didn't think they were responsible for telling maybe child welfare, social services, whoever that handles that kind of stuff. So then it became, you have a form that has to be filled out, and it has to go to all of these different agencies. And some of them may or may not be responsible for that incident, but they get notified. Dealt with mandated reporting a lot because some of my positions specifically dealt with that. And then when you go into the schools and you see, I just looked over and says, "Where's my form? What do you mean?" I said, "That's a mandated report." "What does that mean?" "You need to report that." Right. And I've had to have that conversation with attorneys for schools. You are mandated to report that. This is attorney-client privilege. No, it's not.
Nope.
No, it is not. You are mandated to report that. I mean, I'm not saying that you are specifically mandated as an attorney, but you are mandated to make sure your client does, because you're mandated by the oath or whatever you call your responsibility to be in that position with your client. You're obligated to keep them safe from prosecution. They need to take action. I won most of those. I lost a few of them. When I find out about it, you're mandated. You're mandated to report it. You want me to fill it out, or you want to? I'll take care of it. Okay. So
that's all I got for you.
That's all. Yeah. It's all good. There's always going to be, and just we're always going to get into this conversation. Is it the school's responsibility to teach? It's the school's responsibility to respond to the needs of their community. It's the school's responsibility to mandate or to follow the mandates set by the state, and especially those pertaining to them. It's not for us to push back if we don't agree with that policy. There's legal ways to do that. But once you get that mandate, you got to follow it. Is it a bad one? I don't know if it's a good one or a bad one. I do know that I applaud anybody who is taking efforts and steps to prevent some tragedies.
The intent is good.
Yeah. Knowledge is usually good.
Usually. Yeah.
Usually. Sometimes it hurts people. I've seen that. We'll leave it at that. But
yeah.
Is it? I don't know whether that's the right place to do it, but if you want to teach everybody in your state how to safely handle a firearm, school's a likely good place to start.
All right. There you go.
Is it correct or not? I don't know.
I appreciate your input and your thoughts, Kelly. I knew you'd be a good person to talk to about it. So.
I've got opinions about just about everything.
I know. All right. And then obviously feel free to email us or put in the little comment section on our blog or podcast on your thoughts.
We respond.
Yeah, I think we pretty much respond every time. Keep the comments respectful, but we want to know your opinion. That's all I ask.
Okay. Either way. Alrighty.
See you next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.